I've DM'd a lot of Dungeons & Dragons in 3E, 4E, and 5E, and I've seen tons of different kinds of monsters and NPCs. Lots of them do get presented as being these intense, epic, amazingly powerful things, but in reality, in actual gameplay, a lot of them just get smacked down by the characters. But that's not true 100% of the time. Every once in a while, you will come across a monster that has such unique abilities, such strange or unexpected features that it catches the players off guard. It just blindsides them, and the results of that can be disastrous, like TPK disastrous. So there's this one aberration that every time I've run it in all these editions, it has caused a TPK, or essentially a TPK. It is the balhannoth. You don't hear about it so much. It's not one of the really popular, well-known ones like Beholder, Mind Flayer, even Aberrations I think are definitely more popular in terms of aberrations. But the balhannoth is a nasty, nasty kind of aberration. And something that's very curious is that this monster has been redesigned and re-envisioned in all three of these different editions of D&D. There are some things in common, of course, and like it still looks the same more or less, but it's really been changed in each edition. So let's kind of start from the beginning, and I'll tell you what's up with this creature, and I'll tell you some stories about these TPKs, because I can't think of any other monster that this has happened with. So in 3E, we get the balhannoth. This is where it's introduced. It's in Monster Manual 4. It's a CR10 large aberration. It's a blind thing. It has no eyes, and its limbs are these 4 long, powerful tentacles. It can move quite fast, and it can climb quite fast. And when it hits with the tentacles, it has an improved grab. So it automatically grapples the creatures that it hits, in addition to dealing the bludgeoning damage, and it starts restraining and constricting them. So a curious thing about this creature, it lives down in the Underdark, and it has evolved in this magical environment. So it's actually blind, but it has this special sense called Dwemer sight. It can sense and pinpoint the presence of magic, any kind of magic, whether that's an ongoing spell effect or a magic item or just whatever, anything magical, it can detect that. So that's also very curious. If you have nothing magical on you, no spells, and you like stand away from the thing where it's not hearing you or anything, it just is completely oblivious to your existence. It has a dimensional lock aura that goes out to 20 feet, so that shuts down teleportation, interplanar travel, none of that works. And whenever it's grappling a creature, that creature is subjected to an anti-magic effect. Yeah, that's right. So your spells get suppressed, your magic items get suppressed, you can't cast spells, any kind of magical or supernatural features not working. That can be very crippling. This is all combined with the fact that this is a very stealthy monster. Its skin changes color to match its surroundings, so it has this camouflage effect. And it lurks there, waiting for some prey to come by. Just look at the illustration. I freaking love this artwork. This is the best of all the balhannoth pieces. The 3E party that encountered this, I don't remember the fight super well. I remember that they were a very spellcaster-heavy party. They might have been all spellcasters. I remember it grappling the characters. They couldn't use their spells or their magic items. They had a hard time getting away. I remember somebody wanting to teleport away or use a dimension door, and it didn't work because of the dimensional lock. It was a slaughter. The 4E balhannoth really is different. It's quite different in a number of ways. So it's still an Underdark, subterranean, lurker, ambush monster. It's a level 13 elite monster, still large size. It no longer has the Dwemer sight. Now it just has blind sight out to 10 squares, which means 50 feet. And now it's a bit slower. It's actually slower than a regular person, though it still keeps the spider climb effect. It has a tentacle with a reach of 15 feet. It has a whipping tentacles, which is essentially a 15-foot AoE tentacle attack. So imagine like a flurry of tentacles that can attack any creatures within 15 feet of it. And it's large size, so out to 15 feet from a large size monster is a really big area. So that can probably hit multiple characters, maybe even the whole party. Also, when it hits with whipping tentacles, it can slide the target, so either push it farther away or bring it in, pulling it closer. It has a sort of sneak attack effect. Whenever it has advantage on its attack and it hits, it deals an extra 2d8 damage. But unlike sneak attack, it's not just once per round, it's every single time it hits a target while it has advantage. As a bonus action, it can turn invisible until the end of its next turn, or until it takes any standard action. And then it has something called Reality Shift, which was what was called a move action in 4th edition. So instead of moving its regular walking or climbing speed, instead, it can teleport up to 50 feet. When it teleports away, the characters that were adjacent to it get dazed until the end of its next turn. Dazed was like a semi-stunned, like a halfway stunned. And then when it arrives at the end of the teleport, it automatically gets advantage on its attacks against creatures that it has teleported adjacent to. So right before the fight begins, it turns invisible on its first turn, teleports in, does the whipping tentacles, has advantage on all the attacks, does the sneak attack and the sliding to all the party, then it uses the bonus action to turn invisible. Then the characters will take their turns, back to the balhannoth, it's still invisible, it attacks with those whipping tentacles, hits everyone, sneak attacks them, slides them, then it turns invisible as a bonus action and uses the move action to reality shift, teleport away, dazing everyone that was next to it when it does so. It's really synergistic. It just flows really well in that tactical kind of minis tactical combat game that was 4E. It functioned fantastically. The encounter that I had in that edition, I remember the balhannoth was in its cave. It had some cave terrain like stalactites and rock formations and walls and this pit. And it had some allied aberrations, which were gricks. So some lesser aberrations that put some melee meat in there and would grapple the characters so that they had a hard time dealing with the effects of the balhannoth. And everybody got killed except for one character. She barely escaped, made it out alive, and she was so traumatized by that experience, she retired. I remember the player never played that character ever again. Then we come to the 5th edition balhannoth, which might be my favorite version. I'm not sure. I like them all each in their own way. It's still a large size aberration. It is a CR 11, so it's still around that same type of difficulty range, kind of when the characters are going from mid to high levels. It's now associated with the Shadowfell instead of the Underdark. I'm kind of take it or leave it on that point there. It has some really amazing features. Check this out. So it's still a little bit slow on the ground and with its climbing. It has blind sight out to 500 feet and telepathy out to 1 mile. It has a 2 per day legendary resistance, so it can automatically succeed on a saving throw that it otherwise would have failed. It has a multi-attack where it can make a bite plus 2 tentacles or 4 tentacles. The bite deals a lot of damage. It's 4d10 plus 3 piercing. A tentacle has a 10-foot reach. It does 2d6 plus 3 bludgeoning, and it grapples and restrains the target, and can even pull the target up to 5 feet closer to itself. It can have up to 4 different creatures grappled and restrained in its tentacles. And it has 3 legendary actions, and each of them only takes 1 legendary action, so it could do each one of these or one of them 3 times, or however it wants to mix them up. It can do a bite attack, it can teleport up to 60 feet, and when it teleports, it takes with it any creature that it's grappling, or it can vanish. It becomes invisible until it makes an attack roll. It keeps going. All right, there are the layer actions. It has 3, and they're amazing. The first one is it warps reality around it in an area up to 500 feet. It takes 10 minutes for this to set in, and it reshapes the terrain and the objects. It can't alter anything that's living. It just reshapes inorganic, non-magical matter. And it can make things look pretty much however it wants. If someone comes and closely inspects these warped items, they can tell that they're fake. It gives an example here, like books are filled with empty pages or maybe just mad scribbling. Golden items are obviously fake gold. The transformation just lasts. It just lasts permanently until the balhannoth dies or uses that layer action again. The second layer action is that it targets a creature within 500 feet of it. The creature has to succeed on a DC 16 wisdom saving throw, or it gets teleported up to 60 feet to a place that the balhannoth chooses. And the third layer effect is that the balhannoth targets a creature within 500 feet. These ranges are incredible. The target again has to succeed on a DC 16 wisdom save, or the balhannoth becomes invisible to that creature for a minute, or until the balhannoth attacks that creature. It also has 2 very interesting regional effects. The first is that creatures within 1 mile of the balhannoth's lair experience a sensation of getting closer and closer to whatever it is that they desire the most, and the sensation gets stronger and stronger as they get closer to the balhannoth's lair. And the second one is that the balhannoth can sense what is the strongest desire of any humanoid that's within 1 mile of its lair, and it also learns if that desire is involving a place, a safe location to rest, a temple, a home. So let me tell you a little story. This is the 5th edition Balhannoth TPK story, and it's really the most memorable one to me. So I ran this live stream campaign some years ago. It was my first live stream campaign. The technical aspects of it are a little bit rudimentary, but the actual campaign and the story and the characters and everything was fantastic. We loved that campaign. It was called The Land of Dreams and Nightmares. One of the main characters in the party was Noxaqual, Captain Noxaqual. He was a Hexblade warlock. His patron was the Masked One, this greater shadow spirit, shadow lord. And one of Noxaqual's main personal objectives was to find and bring back together the suit of armor of the Masked One. He also had the Masked One's sword. And he was just missing 2 pieces of the suit, the boots of shadow walking and the breastplate. And he and the party had determined that the boots had been stolen from the devils that previously possessed them, stolen by Nyarlathotep, the aberrant lord, the mad outer god. And so the party, along with some pretty powerful devil NPCs, including a horned devil, made an incursion into Nyarlathotep's realm. So we're talking like a far realm demi-plane, a mad landscape, a nightmare landscape. They had some really harsh, really intense encounters along the way as they were traveling, trying to find Nyarlathotep's palace, wherein they would hopefully find the boots of shadow walking. The most devastating encounter throughout this trek across the landscape was against the guardian of the realm, Nyarlathotep's champion, the adamantine golem. And it wiped out pretty much all of those devil NPCs and the party's monk, Drake Fell. By the way, you can read about this adamantine golem and these magic items of the Masked One in my book, Esper's Emporium of Esoterica, if anyone's so inclined. The remaining characters persevere. They at last come to where they can see the palace of Nyarlathotep, just there in the near distance, built into this mountainside. They infiltrate the palace. They come into this great hall, this strange great hall, and they are ambushed there. It was actually a balhannoth's lair. It had sensed their desires. It had reshaped its cave to look like the palace of Nyarlathotep. It was a brutal fight. There was a couple other aberration monsters involved. There was a death kiss, which is this like blood-sucking beholderkin, and something called a chaos stormcaller, along with the balhannoth. At one point in the fight, the balhannoth had Noxaqual grappled. It teleported away with him and flung him down this big pit that was in the center of the cave, and then it went down the pit with its own teleporting and climbing, and he met his demise down there. Noxaqual got killed, and it was nearly a complete total party kill. The party's necromancer wizard, Arlen, he used Dimension Door to get out of there, and he brought with him Carderock Hawkness, the paladin bard of the party, and I believe they had Drake's corpse maybe in a bag of holding. They managed to survive the trek back across this nightmarish landscape and made it back to the material plane, back to the world. So what a monster. The balhannoth is just incredible. If you're a DM, I highly suggest trying out this monster at some point, and make sure you do give it some appropriate terrain, like a lair. That's what it's really built for. A lot of monsters are that way. I mean, pretty much any monster can have its own lair or some kind of way in which it uses the terrain to its advantage. Not all encounters have to be that way, of course, but some of them really should be. It only makes sense. Anyone, from a player character to an intelligent monster like a dragon, all the way down to just like a beast animal, is going to have some sort of layer that favors its abilities, that suits its ecology. Of course, keep in mind that does make the challenge of the fight a little bit higher, but I mean, come on, what do you want all the encounters to just take place in blank, plain, square rooms? Ugh, that's boring. So that's what I got. I hope you enjoy the balhannoth in some sort of way, even if it is killing you. It may not be the Beholder, it may not be the Mind Flayer, but if you ask me, the balhannoth is the real superstar of D&D aberrations. That and Meanlocks. Alright everyone, I'll see you sometime soon. May your adventures be many.